Hello everybody and welcome back to Anxiety Chat. Today I thought I would share a story of OCD. I've not talked too much about OCD, I don't think, on here before. I have OCD. I have something that's called magical thinking OCD, which sounds nice. In reality, it's not so nice. I developed OCD when I was a teenager and I still have it now. I don't know the statistics for all over the world, but I know in the UK that 750,000 people suffer with OCD, and those are people that suffer with it to the point that it impacts their life. There might be more people that suffer with OCD, but they don't really know it, or it doesn't severely impact them. They might just think it's anxiety. There's a lot of different theories. I guess they don't really know why people get OCD, but there's a lot of theories of why somebody might get OCD, although none of them are definite. Some people think it's genetic. Some people think that when something extremely traumatic happens, other people think it's neurological. Other people think it's a learned behavior from seeing somebody else with OCD. There's so many different theories out there, but nobody is totally sure of why somebody might develop OCD. But what they have learned is that people with OCD's brains are actually wired differently. So the neural pathways in somebody's brain with OCD is different than somebody that doesn't have OCD. And I don't know, I've not done extensive research on whether that is through learned behavior, so the OCD making the neural pathways in your brain different, or if you're born with it. I think the first one. I think I had no signs, I don't think, of having OCD until I suddenly developed OCD. My story of OCD is I had very severe anxiety from when I was 10. So it was on and off, but it was very, very hard for me to live a normal life. When I was about 10, I didn't go to school for a while because I just found things so difficult. I don't really know how else to explain it, but anxiety was huge for me from about 10. And then I went to a therapist when I was about, I want to say 15-ish, 16 maybe a bit older, who was really awful. And I'm not blaming her for giving me OCD. Obviously, that's not how things work. You can't just give somebody a mental illness. But it wasn't good. It wasn't good. And I went into therapy with anxiety, and I came out of this particular therapy with anxiety and OCD. And I don't want to put anybody off going to therapy, because therapy honestly can be one of the best things you could ever do. But this experience for me was not good. And I don't really remember loads about developing the OCD. I think it was pretty quick. I think it was, I personally believe that my anxiety got to a specific point that I was I cannot take this anymore. And so OCD was something that I could do to kind of control it. OCD is obviously obsessive compulsive disorder. And so there's the obsession, which is the obsessive thought, usually an unwanted thought. People have a whole host of different thoughts around this. My thought was often, you'll be sick, you'll get really sick, or you'll be out of control, you'll have a panic attack. So that was my thought constantly, and I still obviously have these thoughts that are you're going to have a panic attack, you're going to get sick, you're going to have a panic attack, you're going to get sick, and imagining myself in scenarios that were horrific. People can have a whole host of different thoughts, sometimes sexual thoughts, sometimes unwanted thoughts about religion, about going into school and, doing something really horrible. People's thoughts are really serious around OCD. Some people could have really difficult thoughts, and I have had those thoughts before. The difference between OCD and a regular person having these thoughts, not that people with OCD aren't regular people, you know what I'm trying to say. A person without OCD has these thoughts, they just brush it off most of the time. So they have a thought that's an unwanted thought. Everybody has unwanted thoughts that are quite distressing. But most people think, oh, that was a really weird thought. Why did I think that? That's weird. And move on. Whereas somebody with OCD attaches meaning to that thought, I guess. So for me personally, with my OCD, I think a thought like that, and I think in every ounce of my being, I don't want that to happen so much. I'm going to do things that my OCD tells me to do so that I won't have to be sick or have to have a panic attack. It's kind of difficult to explain, but I would have a thought that was you're going to get sick if you do that. And so my OCD would say, okay, if you switch a light switch on and off 5 times, then you won't be sick. And it carried on that way for a really long time. And at points, my OCD was unbelievably severe. I kind of feel like a lot of it I've blocked out. But I do remember there was a street near my parents' house when I lived there where I'd go down to work, and every single time I stood on a crack of the pavement, I would have to start at the very beginning of the pavement. So it is also a very cracky pavement. And so if my foot, I've also got size 8 feet, which is kind of big. If any part of my foot stood on the crack, I would have to go back to the beginning. And so it took me about 45 minutes to walk up this street. And every single aspect of my life revolved around OCD. It's like this voice, it's like this force is the best way I can describe it, this force that comes into your body and your brain that overtakes completely your regular life things like waking up in the morning. I'd have to have, I said this every thought every single time, I'd have to touch things in a certain way. Turning the light switch on, I still have this OCD habit, but switching the light switch on and off a certain amount of times, even things like choosing cutlery, I'd have to choose the third one. Things like, and I still, when I'm really anxious, I still get this in like a lot of ways. Like if I'm in a shop, I'll have to choose the third. If I'm choosing a block of cheese, I'll have to choose the third block of cheese. There's no logical sense to any of this stuff. I know that. I don't really care about that. I care more about hopefully one day not having OCD or having a much lessened OCD. But at the time that it was so severe, I would have to breathe in a certain way. I'd have to, if I was thinking of a word, I was trying to use a word, I would have to think of the third best word to use. I couldn't use, oh, that's amazing. I was thinking amazing, beautiful, gorgeous. I was thinking the third best word. Everything in my life was OCD. I don't really remember specifically the turning point, but I do know that I had a really incredible therapist and she helped me lessen my anxiety. She helped my anxiety calm down, which in turn made my OCD calm down. But I do remember a couple of years ago when I'd met my partner, telling him about OCD, and I didn't actually tell him about OCD. He saw OCD, obviously, and I remember the first time that he came to my house and I was turning on a light and turning on and off 5 times and just not saying anything, but knowing I had to do that, and him thinking, what is up with that? I remember telling him all of this and saying, nobody in my life has ever said to me, you do know that OCD isn't actually real. Because it sounds so obvious to people, I think. It sounds so obvious, like obviously it's not real. But even now, like I still have OCD. I still think that I still have OCD patterns that I do every single day. I still have OCD thoughts every single day. Like I said, the neural pathways in somebody with OCD's brains are different. So it's much harder than just not doing it for people. It's not as simple as somebody without OCD's brain, they're not going to do that. Somebody with OCD's brain, it's much more difficult. Although it is possible, but it's much more difficult. So I remember a time that my flat was really, really, really messy, and Drew, my partner, was at my flat, and I said to him, like, I know this is so messy, but I cannot clean it because my OCD says that if I put that tissue that's on the floor in the bin, for example, I will get sick. And he then said to me, okay, so let's logically look at this. You putting that piece of tissue in the bin is not going to make you sick. There's no way that that can happen. There's no way that that can make you sick. Picking it up isn't going to make you sick. Putting the bin isn't going to make you sick. Nothing around that's not going to happen. I don't know. I think certain people, if they said to me, I'd be like, shut up, leave me alone. That's not how OCD works. But I think the way he said it and the way I was at that time, I wasn't as anxious. Something clicked and I realised OCD isn't real. And for anybody watching that has OCD, this might not be the time for you that you want to hear it. This might not help you at all. But for me, it really helped to think about my OCD and be, rather than just doing it and being so terrified to even talk to my OCD or even look at it or even think about it. I was just so terrified of this thing that came, but also not terrified. I also felt like I really loved this thing that came. I felt like I really loved OCD because it gave me an option. It gave me control. It helped the anxiety because I thought that if I touch this 5 times, I won't get sick. How amazing is that? That's like my peak anxiety thing. if I do this, I won't have a panic attack. Well, that's great, because those things are really starting to annoy me and I can't think about having another panic attack. So there was a part of me that I think wanted to keep it because it made me feel more safe in a world where I did not feel safe at all. But I was at a point where I felt like I was ready to look at it. And ever since then, like I said, my OCD is still around. I personally believe that I will always have OCD to an extent. And my OCD does get worse around times where I'm feeling anxious. But for the most part, I am much better. I'm able to rationalize a lot of it, not all of it, but I'm able to rationalize a lot of it. And I'm also able to ask it to help me in certain situations. So OCD is something that is very difficult to understand from an outsider's perspective. But there are so many studies into OCD. I find it from a personal perspective and just a perspective of being interested in mental health. I find it very fascinating that the brain can do this. The brain can create mechanisms and systems in order to try and help us feel more calm. I find it really cool, actually. Don't find it so cool when I'm suffering and I can't breathe because I need to breathe in a certain way and my OCD says this and this and this. If you get anything from this video and you're somebody with OCD, I want you to know that it is possible. It is actually possible to get better from OCD. I think when it comes to all mental health illnesses, I think our main goal shouldn't be to get rid of it. I think that's actually the best way to feel more anxious and to have more issues around it. I think progress and being able to keep it under control are the things that we should aim for. And I feel at the moment, touch wood, that I have that. And there are so many different like helplines and different websites that you can get help with OCD from. But I just want to share this story and hopefully somebody out there can relate to this. If you have an OCD story or have experienced OCD or know somebody that's experienced OCD, I'd really love to hear that story. We have a way that you can share your stories with us. If you look in the description box of this video, there are so many different ways that you can share your story with us. We'd really love to hear more stories from you. And there's lots of other videos on this channel if you'd like to go and have a look. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in a new video soon. Bye!